Like the content you see? Support this channel on Patreon. Link in the description. When the Republic formed into the Galactic Empire, its priorities turned from a Senate to the military. A government of discussion turned to a government of might. Within this new tyrannical rule came the role of the ISB, aka the Imperial Security Bureau. To keep reins on their new throne, the Empire embraced the mentality of a police state, watching its citizens' every move through the HoloNet or in public. It is fitting then that one of the Bureau's top agents was born within the Empire's capital planet, Coruscant.
You, Lasat! Face me!
ISB 021, also known as Agent Kallus, was a young boy when the ISB was created. But as he grew, so too did the organization, going from a small group of agents to a full-fledged operation. Kallus had much pride in his empire, a loyalist through and through. After his purge of Lasan, where he had a hand in exterminating nearly all native Lasat, he quickly became a noted agent. In fact, Kallus and his squad were the reason the T-7 Ion disruptors were banned because of their devastating effects on vehicles, and notably, other sentients. But as this was the Empire, Agent Kallus's repercussion was a promotion, entrusted with an Imperial Star Destroyer in his own station on Lothal. He would find opposition on the planet, coming to blows with a rebel group. Time after time he was thwarted by these rebels, eventually reprimanded by Grand Moff Tarkin himself. But during his chase of the Ghost Crew, after an incident with Zeb Aurelios, he started to rethink his role within the Empire.
Raider!
A few decades later, after the rebels successfully overthrew the Empire, a new faction grew from its ashes. The Galactic Empire had some charade of government, but the First Order that rose from its remnants threw all pretense aside, becoming a no-nonsense military faction. This new group, like their previous empire, used stormtroopers on their front lines, and the training of these troopers were even more strict than before, each man or woman reconditioned and judged, all the way down to even their diet. And though the life of a First Order stormtrooper was tough, many of its soldiers carried the rank with pride. FN-2199, known as Traitor on internet memes, and called Nines by his comrades. Little is known of Nines outside of his red hair and striking blue eyes, but what was known of him was his complete and utter loyalty to the First Order above all else. For most of his life, he was trained in the First Order facilities, battling simulations, always ranking behind his comrade, FN-2187, later known simply as Finn. But as the First Order extended its reach across the galaxy, Nines was able to make a name for himself, proving his worth under Captain Phasma, executing miners on Pressie's tumble. Shortly after the skirmish of Jakku, he was promoted to a riot squad, reuniting with the traitor Finn on Takodana. Though Finn had beaten Nines before, the First Order trooper got the best of him during their short bout, nearly killing Finn before he was defeated by Han Solo and Chewbacca's bowcaster. For this video, I will be examining these characters as they appear in the Star Wars canon. For Agent Kallus, I will be examining him up until Season 2 of Star Wars Rebels, using such materials as the sourcebooks, comics, and junior novels. For FN-2199, I will be examining him up until The Force Awakens, utilizing sources like the Before the Awakening novella and the Force Awakens visual dictionary. In terms of training, Kallus and Nines got around the same curriculum, Kallus in the Royal Imperial Academy, and Nines on an undisclosed First Order base. But considering how close Captain Phasma and the First Order tracked their troopers, I would say Nines' training was more strenuous and calculated, though training in an Imperial Academy was no less competitive. That said, their physicality was trained relentlessly, Kallus able to go toe-to-toe with Lasat, a species with far more natural strength than humans. And during FN-2199's training, he he was noted for his own brutish strength against his colleagues. Their endurance would be relatively the same as well, both of their superiors allowing nothing but the best. Unlike most ISB officers, Kallus got his hands dirty, fighting shoulder to shoulder with his stormtrooper squads. And it's worth noting that Nines went from a mere cadet to a member of a riot squad in just a few days, going from one of Phasma's squads to Kylo's, so he definitely impressed. That all said, I don't see any definitive edges between the two. One could argue that Kallus might be stronger than Nines, as he did face against Lasat, but Nines has never been put in a similar situation. But for me, it's reasonable to say that Nines could at least hold his own. One could also argue that Nines' First Order training was superior, but this is more assumption on my part than anything else. In any case, there will be no edge given to either opponent for their physical abilities. Though both opponents use blasters, for this matchup, I will be examining their use of melee weapons. Near the end of Agent Kallus' campaign on Lasan, he acquired an AB-75 bow rifle, a weapon exclusive to the Lasan High Honor Guard. Think the Imperial Guard, but a little more purple. It was a Lasat guardsman that gave Kallus his bow rifle, an expression of defeat. The weapon was very reminiscent to an electrostaff, flanked by 2 energy pulses. Though this has never been confirmed in Rebels or any source books, it's very likely that the weapon could stand up against lightsabers. When FN-2199 was promoted to a riot squad, he was supplied with a Z6 baton and riot shield. His baton looked much like a real-world police baton, common in American law enforcement, save for, of course, the pulsing energy at its far end, an energy pulse that could repel lightsabers. Though the weapon was much shorter than a bow rifle, sacrificing reach, it did have a magnetic grip and a rotating function for more devastating swings, and the weapon was often paired off with a riot shield for added protection. Agent Kallus wore standard ISB riot armor, which included a helmet, chest, and shoulder plates. His armor afforded him less protection in comparison to a stormtrooper, but allowed him more movement, which runs in line with his melee-focused combat. But his helmet did have a neck guard, which protected strikes from the back, much like the helmets worn by Romans. By contrast, Nines wore full body armor and helmet, beneficial when protecting himself against blunt force trauma or gases, but a little cumbersome when fighting hand-to-hand. But FN-2199 does compensate by applying a more strength-based style. Looking purely at their weapons and armor, I would have to side with the First Order Stormtrooper. I do think Kallus does have his advantages with his maneuverability and the extra reach of his bow rifle, but Nine's full body armor and riot shield does give him the advantage to close the gap and use his more short-range weapon. For this, I give FN-2199 the edge for his weaponry and armor. I actually consider Agent Kallus' armor to be an extension of his fighting style and his combative abilities. As stated, his single breastplate and shoulder pads does free up a lot of movement. Whenever he fought Zeb, he utilized speed instead of strength, integrating kicks and rolls. Yes, it should be noted that he is an animated character, so his movement would look more fluid and bouncy, but I do think in a general sense, he did favor speed through redirection and counter, rather than brute force. On the other hand, we have Nines, who certainly was more savage. This is highlighted in both of his fights against Finn, where he used superior strength to break through his opponent's defense. However, this type of fighting did leave him open to counter, as he overextended himself after a strike, but considering his armor, he could afford such a risk, simply soaking damage with his shield, or opening a close-range attack with his rotating baton. It's a standard tactic employed by real-world fighters who take a few punches or kicks just to breach their opponent's guard. The interesting thing would be how Nines would use his shield, or if he would discard it like he did against Finn. His shield would help, but it would also leave him encumbered against someone like Kallus. Ultimately, I think a combative comparison between Kallus and Nines would look much like the first fight between Finn and FN-2199, rather than the second. In the second fight, the novelization states that the First Order Stormtrooper was being extra cautious, giving respect to the lethality of the lightsaber, whereas in the first fight, he went in on Finn like a raging bull, trying to tackle him to the ground at one point. But Finn, much like how I think Kallus would react, snuck under Nine's guard, countering with his own weapon. Plus, it's also worth noting that Finn was unfamiliar with the use of a lightsaber, whereas he was very comfortable with the use of a mace during training. Even if Nines plays it safe, like he did on Takodana, he would be playing to Kallus' own game, one the ISB officer was more seasoned to play. It's true that the honor guards of Lasan are untested, and therefore, it's difficult to know how skilled Kallus truly is relative to them. But the respect Zeb gives to him, and Zeb's own skill by extension, to me, makes the achievement considerable. Nines definitely comes off as talented, but he was definitely still wet behind the ears. Agent Kallus gets the edge for his combative abilities. The reason I chose Agent Kallus versus FN-2199 is because you all kept asking for Kylo, Finn, and Rey, characters who are still developing, especially Kylo and Rey. So I started to think about characters I could use from the new material. At one point, I thought of doing a joke video between Boba Fett and Captain Phasma, judging who was more overhyped and underwhelming. But then the article came out on Nines, so I thought it would be interesting doing a matchup with him, and it seemed appropriate to pair him off with Agent Kallus in a melee fight. So here we are, the two militant enforcers. If they met on the battlefield, who would win? Let's set up this fight. Let's say it takes place in a training facility on Kamino. As a final tally, I would say the advantage to the victor goes 6 to 10. The following is a hypothetical explanation of these outcomes. First, let's examine the early fight. I would say Nines would attack first, but based on the two fights he had with Finn, I can see one of two things happening. 1, he rushes in, or 2, he proceeds cautiously. So we must consider the context of both fights. And with that thought process, I think it's more likely for him to rush in, as he would be more familiar with Kallus' bow rifle, regarding it with less respect than Finn's lightsaber. I don't think Kallus would go on the defensive, but instead, meet the young trooper head on. In the scenarios where Nines rushes in, I favor Kallus. He would likely redirect Nines' strikes, scoring hits of his own. But if Nines is more cautious, I can see the fight going on a bit longer. Even so, I would say Kallus has a 2-to-1 advantage in the early fight. But this really stems from how FN-2199 approaches the fight. Even if Nines throws caution to the wind, I do think he would manage a defense with his shield, holding out until the mid-fight. But Kallus was more agile and he had more reach with his bow rifle, so it will be difficult for Nines to breach his guard. However, I do see certain scenarios where Nines could tackle Kallus, catching him off guard, or using his Z6 baton's rotating function to throw Kallus off. Nonetheless, considering Kallus' experience fighting Lasat, I don't think he will be surprised by any brutish assault from the First Order trooper. In the mid-fight, I see Kallus taking a 3-to-2 advantage. Nines would keep himself in the fight, possibly even trading blows with Kallus, but I favor the ISB officer's reach, mobility, and experience. But if Nines does manage to find an answer to Kallus, the fight would continue into an endurance match. And in this, I really don't see a definitive edge to either opponent. Neither has really shown any achievements in endurance. All we have to go on is their training, which again, may go to Nines, as First Order training was pretty strenuous, but so was training at the top academy in the Empire. In the novel Lost Stars, we actually get to see the extensive training one goes through at the Imperial Academy, the same training Kallus would have gone through. But in any case, of all the scenarios, I believe this matchup would end in the mid-fight, either by way of a disarm or incapacitation. Nines would put up a fight, but I favor Kallus' overall chances as a bow rifle fighter, shocking the trooper until he fell unconscious. The reason I don't think this ends early is simply because of Nines' shield and my own perceptions of his durability. It would take Kallus a few shocks with his bow rifle, but eventually, he would get the job done. And in conclusion, I declare Agent Kallus, the conqueror of Lasan, the victor. Of course, this is all my opinion based on my interpretation of the lore. Do you agree that Agent Kallus would take a majority against FN-2199? Or do you believe the traitor-hater is more likely the victor? Let me know in the comments below, and of course, Peace, love, and may the Force be with you. Always.
I really wanted to show how deadly the weapon could be.
Time periods. Through strife and turmoil, they both led successful careers, becoming the best bounty hunters of the Old Republic and the Galactic Empire.
The dark side.
Like this guy, what is he doing? Stop shooting at me. I'm a lightsaber wielding foe. Don't shoot.
Within this new tyrannical rule came the role of the Imperial Security Bureau. That is a mouthful. That's definitely a mouthful. But as the First Order extended its reach across against, oh my god. Simply soaking damage with his shield. Yay, motorcycle. Motorcycle's like, hey, I'm gonna be a motorcycle and just be loud.